trouble, and we haven't even got started
That's exactly
yet.
right.
We're talking UFOs, and I'm already on the list over here.
That's
Brad Staggs is here, and he's been here all week talking about UFOs, and we talked about Billy Meier at the top of the show today, Brad, and we're going to visit more with him today, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. You know, it's been interesting since yesterday when we showed you the photos and the movie footage that Billy Meier has taken. The response has been very interesting. It's very easy when you see a fuzzy picture of something that someone says is in the nighttime sky that, oh, that's a UFO.
Oh, yeah, you believe that.
But you see a nice, clear, crisp photo with all the details, and people won't believe it. They'll think it's a phony.
That's right.
And that's exactly what's happened with Billy Meier. His photos and his movie footage are so crisp and precise that no one believes it. So these four people, Tom Welch, Colonel Wendell Stevens, Lee and Britt Elders, set out to investigate this man. And what we're going to look at today is their investigation in trying to disprove Billy Meier's claims that he actually had contact. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. We'll recap what we've seen since yesterday.
Edward Billy Meier, handicapped Swiss farmer and self-proclaimed contactee of visitors to our planet from the Pleiades star cluster. These are the photos that Meier claims he has taken of their spaceships over a 6-year period from 1975 to 1981. Lee and Britt Elders, owners of an investigative firm known as Intercept, found themselves thrust into the middle of the case by their friend and longtime UFO buff, Colonel Wendell Stevens. They were skeptical at best.
He wanted to disprove it immediately.
Right.
He thought he could go in, look at Billy Meier and say, you faked this whole thing, and go from there.
But as the investigation wore on, they found their position eroding somewhat.
Billy brought out photographs. Before we left, he gave us metal samples. So here we're sitting with hard evidence that can be analyzed by our technology, and not us make a judgment call, but a scientist, a qualified person, can then make his judgment of it.
They began with the photographs. In order to completely analyze them and search for any signs of trickery, the elders needed highly specialized equipment.
A microdensitometer was the piece of equipment we really needed more than anything else, but we couldn't find it. There were only a few available, and they were in government laboratories, and of course they didn't want to invite us in to look for strings and UFO photographs or wires or overlays and things like that.
A year later, they were in luck. The University of Arizona had been donated a microdensitometer, and the elders were knocking on their door the very next day. The university allowed them to use their equipment, but not their name. UFOs were still a taboo subject in the scientific community. The objects in the photos were analyzed.
All of the analysis that was done says it's an object some distance from the camera, approximately 21 feet wide. And that's all it can tell you. It can tell you that there are no strings, there are no wires, it is not a paste up, but it can't tell you what it is.
Their position softened even more.
And it was no longer of, hey, this guy's hoaxing it. If he is hoaxing it, let's find out how. But if he's not hoaxing it, what's going on here?
The elders continued the investigation, but it was becoming expensive. After several trips to Switzerland, nearly $80,000 had been invested in their research. They published 2 books to help underwrite the project. Funds from the books were channeled back into the case, and their search continued. The next evidence to be considered were sound recordings of what Meier said were the Pleiadian spacecraft.
Synthesizers on the market that have oscillators that change that randomly. Even if you got 9 or 10 of them going, they wouldn't change from those peaks that quickly.
He and his wife, with separate tape recorders, went to this hill where Billy was to have a contact. When we interviewed them later on the sound, they said it just seemed to emanate from everywhere. We have on computer banks every sound imaginable, all right? When these sounds were run through that computer, it was not identifiable as anything.
A second set of sounds was also analyzed.
And when Rob did the analysis on it, the computer was pointing the frequency shifts of the sound. It created a sphere of spheres, which Rob, in looking at it, said the only thing he could understand it would be for would be propulsion, some form of propulsion system.
This photo, taken by Meier, fit the scientist's description of the sound source. It was described by Meier as an unmanned drone ship about 7 feet in diameter. By any standards, this is a marvelous piece of work. For a one-armed man working alone, it is a miracle. The third piece of evidence Meier presented is by far the most intriguing. Metal samples that supposedly represented 4 stages in the construction of the Pleiadian spacecraft.
First of all, trying to find a scientist that would attach his name or his laboratory to research on a UFO case was almost impossible. This was back in 78, 79. When we finally found them, that they would look at it, but they didn't really want their name attached. We began with metal, and we found Dr. Vogel at IBM.
From a human interest standpoint, I said, fine, I'll see what I can do to investigate these specimens that were left by these contacts.
His findings were startling. Everything about the samples indicated a cold fusion process, something which, to this day, hasn't been mastered on Earth. It was after Dr. Vogel's testing that Lee Elders became a firm believer in the Billy Meier experience.
Taught me never to get involved in another UFO case. No, seriously, a person once asked me, would I do it all over again? And I said I wouldn't take $1 million for the experience I've had, but I don't think I'd take $1 million to start all over again either.
And for Britt Elders, the years spent with Meier were worth the effort.
Personally, it's taught me not to be so judgmental, because we do live in a society that says you create your own preconceived ideas and then go from there. This, I think, has taught me that you can't have a preconceived idea of something, that you have to learn from and gain from every experience you have, and judge after the experience, not before.
And I want to make the point, you saw them at one point holding up a stick with a ship attached to it. That was deliberately hoaxed so that they could analyze the photograph, and when it was analyzed, it came up as just that, a hoax. So that is why they performed that task, to have something to compare it with. I also want to make the point here, if you think you've seen something, if you'd like to see more of this type of thing, why don't you write us a letter? If you believe in this, if you don't believe in it, what do you think? Send it to us at the address at the end of the show, and we'll go ahead and we'll take care of that for you. We'd love to do more of this.
I tell you what,
isn't that weird?
It's real.
It's bizarre. Yeah, they're out there. Dan's a believer.
Right.
We know it.
That's right.
Thanks, Brad.
Go for it, Billy. He's an alien in disguise.
Yeah, we've known that too.
Thanks for being here. We appreciate it. Stay right there, because coming up next is Go Shribner. Don't miss it.
Noonan, Georgia, that's the time of the day. The Coweta County Courthouse sits in the center of Noonan, dates back to the 1850s, and is on the National Register of Historic Places.